Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Emerald Ash Borer University. This is Robin Usborne from Michigan State University. My EAB University colleagues are Professors Cliff Sadoff and Elizabeth Barnes from Purdue University and Amy Stone from Ohio State University Extension. Today, we are happy to share with you our webinar entitled Oak Wilt Management and Control, presented by Tommy Stueck, Forest Health Forester with the Menominee Tribal Enterprises. Tommy started his professional career at Menominee Tribal Enterprises in the Forest Health Department in April of 2019. Previously, he worked for Tigerton Lumber Company and Central Wisconsin Lumber after receiving his bachelor's degree in forest management from UW Stevens Point. During his first year at MTE, he worked with Dave Mauzell, who was the head of the Forest Health Department at the time, doing multiple invasive plant and invasive tree disease projects. To our participants today, we welcome your questions and comments. Please type them in the Q&A feature or the chat pod, and we will respond to them after the webinar presentation. Tomorrow, you will be mailed a link to a short, voluntary, confidential survey that we hope you will take the time to fill out. It helps us bring these free educational webinars to you. The email will also include our presenters' contact information if you have questions and comments after the webinar is over. For those of you wanting CEUs, this email will be especially important as it gives information on how to obtain those CEUs for watching this live webinar. This webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing later on the EAB University page of the www.emeraldashborer.info website. Thank you for attending today, everyone. And Tommy, you can unmute your mic and begin your presentation.
Thank you. I'm Tommy Stueck, Forest Health Forester with Menominee Tribal Enterprises, and I'm going to give a short yet a little bit lengthy presentation on how we control and monitor oak wilt and how we manage it based on different stand types. So the Menominee Indian Reservation is about 230,000 acres in total. And here at Menominee Tribal Enterprises, we manage around 219,000 acres. And these are all the different stand types that we have here on the reservation. And as of this year, this map is a little outdated on the bottom, but as of 2020, we have 15,199 acres of northern red oak stands. And that's obviously not including pin oak stands, which would increase it by quite a bit. Here are all of our oak wilt infection sites from 2008 when it kind of first started, where we started marking oak wilt pockets. To 2020. And as you can see, this red oak map and that go together pretty good, obviously. Oak stand management on the Menominee Reservation. We treat pin oak and northern red oak fairly different, just because pin oak is generally low quality, and we really don't make saw logs out of pin oak here. It mainly goes for boltwood. So for pin oak, we manage that on stand level basis, and we have used aerial imagery to rate these pin oak stands that we have on severity of oak wilt in them. And so we kind of changed our timelines on those pin oak stands based on how severe the oak wilt was in those stands. And we will cut pin oak stands in the summer while using a 100-foot cellutrete buffer on the stumps for stands that are only adjacent to other pin oak stands. So if you have a stand of pin oak that you want to cut and it has an adjacent stand and it's pin oak, we can cut it. But if the adjacent stand would be northern red oak, then we would hold off on that until the fall time to cut. And every 5 years, we get aerial imagery of leaf on photos, and we will survey those pin oak stands with that aerial imagery, and then we'll mark out pockets if we get into some hybridy, a little bit better quality pin oak. For northern red oak, it's almost completely different. As you may know, northern red oak is generally higher quality than pin oak. And we control oak wilt in these northern red oak stands with individual pockets. And those individual pockets and the treatments I'll get into a little bit later. Our cutting operations in northern red oak stands are prohibited from 40 growing degree days to 2100 growing degree days. Basically break up until August 1st. August 1st is when we start moving into hardwood, transitioning from pine to hardwood here on the reservation. These oak wilt pockets that we treat are higher priority on salvage operations, just because obviously oak wilt isn't, when you mark out oak wilt pockets, it's not like going into a stand of timber and marking it like a single tree selection or anything like that. So you're taking out some pretty high quality trees when you're doing this. So it's on our high priority list to try to get those trees out of there and preserve the high quality saw logs that may come out of these pockets. And these red oak stands that I showed you before, right here, we fly, I would say about 90% of these with drones. So we have multiple launching spots throughout these stands, especially this part of the reservation. We fly, I would say, at least 90% of those stands. And here's the general workflow for oak wilts. Just kind of a timeline for how our operations go. We start off with prevention. That's basically year round. Obviously with seasonal restrictions, with which most places have. High risk marking. Our marking guidelines kind of changed a little bit for marking out trees with weak branch unions, and trying to get rid of some of those double trees off the stump, and promoting more stand diversity, even though we have pretty diverse forests on the Menominee Reservation here. Survey and monitoring, like I talked before, we have aerial photos that we try to get in every, I'm sorry about that. We have aerial photos that come in every 5 years that we try to get. Those will be used for our pin oak stands and some red oak stands that we might not be able to fly every year. Our drone flights every year in those high quality stands, and observations by foresters. This one kind of helps out a lot because there's a lot of stands that aren't typed as red oak, but there might be some oak ridges somewhere or some pockets of oak somewhere where we don't really know. And we get quite a few reports from forestry staff about that, and that really helps us out a lot. And then after we fly those drones, we have points that are geotagged onto those photos. So we put those into our JS system, and then I look over through all the photos and I decide, is this one an oak? Should we go look at it, or is it not? And then we have people go out to go check them out and say, this is an oak, it's actively wilting, or it's greater than 1 year dead. They'll take down notes and then they'll send it back to me. And then I will go out and mark those pockets, depending on what the situation is. It's a different treatment, obviously. We use the Bruin root graft method, as a guide, but we don't really use it to a T. It's fairly similar, but here we used to use excavation and root graft barriers, but now within, I think the last time we used one was around 2012 or 2013. It was way before I got here, but we use Girdle and Herbicide methods, cut stump herbicide, and our rapid response method, which some of you may not be too familiar with, but I'll get into that one later. And then monitoring, we monitor each treated pocket for 5 years. And then if it doesn't break out after that 5 years, we consider it contained. Girdling and spraying, obviously after I mark those pockets there, I send out a crew to go girdle and spray them. Salvage harvesting, last year we were graciously given money by the BAA to purchase a company forwarder, and this year was the first, or last year was the first year that we conducted a in-house Oak Wilt salvage operation, and that's adding about anywhere from 60,000 feet to 150,000 feet a year. We're still trying to get everything to flow correctly, but I feel like we could add a little bit extra to that with the right crews doing it. And restoration, obviously we're hoping for natural regen in these pockets. We have a couple pockets that we have planted for more southern species of trees. That kind of work is still going on, and the last time it was planted was probably about 5-6 years ago. So in order to really see if these pockets that were planted with the southern adapted species worked or not. And shelter woods, sometimes if the oak wilt is really bad in the stand, and say there's pine mixed in with it, we might consider doing shelter woods with some of these spots. You kind of have to adapt based on situations. It's every spot's different sometimes, but we've kind of gotten away from doing these shelter wood kind of things with oak wilt because we are so on the spot with our drone flights, and we catch them fairly early, usually within the year that they have gotten infected. So that's not too much of a concern anymore. Here's a picture from what it kind of looks like when we're flying the drone. We'll see this on our tablet as we're flying the drone over various stands. I'm assuming that this is a pocket that was already treated. This isn't an active going pocket. Here's a picture of what we would classify as a rapid responder that I was talking about before, and I will get into in a little bit. You can see that this is an actively wilting tree, and I remember going to this one 2 years ago, and it was an actively wilting tree. You can see the green leaves on the branches. Here I'll get into the rapid response treatment. So this was something that was thought up by my old boss, Dave Mazzell. And I'm not sure if this treatment was done prior to, but this is the first time I ever heard of it was when I started working here, this kind of treatment. So rapid response treatment, our thought process behind it was that tree had a wound up in the upper bowl or the crown. So that disease would be up in that tree, and it hasn't made its way down to stump level yet. So if you girdle the tree and then spray it with chemical, that should kill the stump, and it should stop it from spreading onto nearby trees. And so far it has been fairly successful. The percentage of success is right around 80 to 90%. I have it on a later slide where I'll go through our success rates with our treatments. But that's kind of the gist of our rapid response treatment. So it has to be an actively wilting tree, infection in the current year. It can't be more than 1 year or more than 1 year dead, because that disease would be already into the roots of the infected tree already. There must be green leaves in the crown. Sometimes you can get away with that, but it's all dependent on the situation. Treatment for all pockets, not just for rapid response. We use a double girdle method, and then we spray the bottom girdle with Garlon 4 and bark oil, and we use a 25% mixture, I'm pretty sure. And like I said before, we have a 5-year monitoring period. And here's a picture of fresh phloem and sapwood. If you have a tree that you're kind of questionable about it being an actively wilting tree, you can chop into the tree with a hatchet or an axe or whatever. And if you see this, it would be a tree from this year that has died. And then you can take it from there, whether it would be oak wilt or anything else. But usually, I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but this right here would usually indicate that this tree died in the beginning part of the year, because it hasn't started putting on its late growth yet. And usually that means that that tree had a wound in the early spring, or in the spring or early summer, and it probably died because of oak wilt. Here's a picture of dead phloem and dry sapwood. So say if you have epichromic sprouting on the oak, and you can see it's dead, but there's epichromic sprouting on it, and you're confused whether it's actively wilting or more than 1 year dead, then this would kind of signify that that is older than one year. So you can see that the sapwood looks dry, phloem's dead, brown, it's not nice and white like it was before. You can clearly see the difference between these two here. Here's the double girdle, pretty self-explanatory. The reason we do the double girdle is just so that we make sure that we get all the living tissue cut off of that tree. If you just do one girdle, it should be fine, but just for precautionary measures, we use the double girdle method. Logging, like I said before, we have our own in-house crew that we fill every winter. We use our company forwarder. The main goal of this logging is to remove potential spore producing trees. That's the biggest thing, is trying to get those spore trees out of the woods and remove those spores from the woods and get them processed. We salvage logs and bolts from pockets. Usually pulp is not an option because those trees are so dry that the pulp gets smashed when we fell those trees. We get quite a few help from the contractors. This year we had more than usual. I'd just like to thank everyone that helped in it. It was a crazy year with COVID and everything, and it was great to get a lot of these local pockets cut. Like I said, in-house logging crew, company forwarder, hand cutters. And we did it with one operator and 2 hand cutters this year. Me and my coworker hand cut for us. So here's our summary on our treatments. Out of 546 girdle and herbicide methods. So the girdle and herbicide method is a tree that's more than 1 year dead. and you're marking on a pocket based on Bruin's root graft model. So we've had 88 to 96% success on that, based on 5 years of monitoring. So we've only had, I think, 2 complete monitoring cycles of these treatments. So this percentage, I am assuming, just based on what I have seen, that these percentages will probably go up, because most of these pockets are doing fairly well, especially in the 3 and 4 year mark of these monitoring periods. Fingers crossed that they don't break out in the last year though. Our old excavated root rupture method, 88 to 96%. Our rapid response treatment, like I was talking about before, 83 to 91%. And this is on track for getting up into like 95 to 99% ranges, just based on some treatments that haven't reached the 5 year mark yet. And our cut stump herbicide method, which I didn't really touch on this too much before, but our cut stump herbicide method is, if we're marking a pocket that's inside of an active logging job and that logger is nearby, we'll mark the tree and we'll mark the stump a special way. So then when that logger comes through, he'll cut the tree, and then it won't be treated yet, but then I'll send someone out to spray those stumps that I especially marked, and then we'll do it that way. Instead of girdling the tree, we just spray the stump with the same Garland 4 and bark oil mixture. I think that's it, except for the acknowledgements. That's all I have. So I'm open for any questions that people may have.
Okay, hold on here. Let me see how this goes. Right now, okay, here we go. We have, the first question is, with your rapid response treatment, have you found success correlated to the location of the wound on the tree? If the tree is wounded low on the bole, is the treatment still successful?
Usually not, just because when the tree is wounded that low, the disease is more likely to cross past where you're going to girdle the tree. So if that disease is lower than where your girdle marks are, it's already into the roots, and then it can spread through the root grafts to other neighboring trees around it. So we try not to mark though, or we try not to treat those kind of trees with low wounds in the rapid response treatment.
Okay. Is the percentage of success based on controlled experiments or just before and after observations?
That's just based on, so if we have a pocket that fails, then we'll just obviously mark it down as a failure, and then we'll put it on for another 5 years. So that's just based on the 5 year monitoring period, I guess. I don't know if that really answers your question or not. I'm not really sure how to answer that.
Okay. For stump and herbicide treatment, what happens to the cut stem?
The cut stump and herbicide treatment, the logger just would cut it just like any other tree. They process it and they take the logs, bolts, pulp out of it, and they bring it to the mills just like any other tree that would be in their job.
Okay. Was the rapid response also with girdling and herbicide? I think I missed how they differed.
Okay, I didn't really touch onto this very much. I'm sorry about that. But rapid response treatment is when a single tree is infected and you only treat that one tree, but that's when it's actively wilting within the year. If you have a tree that's older than 1 year dead, and it's not actively wilting, then you resort to the Girdle and Herbicide method, where you mark out a whole pocket with the infected tree and the trees that are around it.
Okay. What do you mean by 25% mixture when using Garlon 4 and bark oil? Thank you.
The Garlon 4 is the active ingredient, so 25% of the whole mixture is Garlon 4. The bark oil is just something to help it stay into the tree, and it'll soak in a little bit better.
All right. Have you considered using Assault imazapyr instead of Garlon? My understanding is that Assault gives better root kill.
I haven't looked into it. We've always used Garlon, and it works for us. If we start to find that we're happening to get a lot of breakouts, maybe we'll consider different chemicals. But as of now, we're doing pretty well with the Garland. So maybe I'll look into it though.
Okay. If an oak tree is infected and then cut and processed, isn't there a risk of the spores infecting other oaks from the spore pads?
Yes, there is. But I guess in my opinion, it's better to get it out of there versus it standing out in the woods and just having the spores being open. Everyone kind of thinks of it a different way, but that's kind of the reason why this is kind of higher on our priority list, is to remove these trees from the woods.
All right. Are you able to scout for trees with wounds in the canopy to monitor before it becomes an active infection?
I suppose that you could, but it would be quite difficult because you would have to probably do that on the ground. And we have such a large landscape that it would be very tough to do that. The easiest way would be to wait, say after a large windstorm, wait about a month or so, and then you do those drone flights. This would be for like a smaller piece of property, not on the reservation. But you would fly that stand with a drone, or you would go on ground and look throughout the oak stand, and you would look for the actively wilting tree. That would be the easiest way to do it, because it sticks out like a sore thumb, because those fresh leaves are dropping in July and August, and it sticks out like a sore thumb whether you're on the ground or you're flying a drone to look for oak wilt.
Okay, we have a comment from someone who has joined us all the way from Ireland. Hello, we don't have oak wilt in Ireland, but what advice would you give from your experience in dealing with this disease in the early outbreak stage?
I would say, depending on how early it is, like if he's talking about early, like it's actively wilting, it's dropping leaves that year, I would say to treat that one tree. If it depends on I guess the situation, it's kind of tough when you're talking about Oak Wilt because it's all situation based really, especially when you're dealing with it early, like the year that it's actively wilting. But I would search Bruin's root graft model, and that would give you a decent idea on how to kind of decide which trees that you would have to treat in order to try to control the disease.
Okay. I think with rapid response, you mentioned green leaves are necessary or had that on the slide. Is that correct? Could you explain that again, or did I miss something?
The whole idea with green leaves that are up in the crown is that that tree is, that the disease is still working up in the crown of the tree yet. If the tree has no green leaves, you can still use the rapid response method, but it'd be more risky of it breaking out the next year or the years to come, just because the chances of that disease moving down the bowl is better because it already wilted the whole tree and now it's moving down the stem to the roots. Like I said before, it's all call based on it, but that's why we say it has to have green leaves, because we have seen the greatest success when there's green leaves up in an actively wilting tree and we treat it with the rapid response method.
Okay. William says, looks like a solution for oak on shallow to bedrock where root cutting is not practical.
Yep, and this helps a lot with steep slopes too. We've had that problem before where we had oak wilt running across steep slopes where loggers wouldn't even want to cut on. So the herbicide and girdle method really helps with that, and with rocky terrain too. It's a big help.
All right. James asks, says, for your girdling method, how deep do you cut? Also, do you ever run into trees that are hollow or cannot support a girdle? And what options do you do in those situations?
I would, you want to cut off the phloem and the cambium of the tree. So you really only have to go probably a ½ inch to an inch into the sapwood of the tree. On some bigger oaks, you have to go a little bit deeper just because of the bark thickness on the tree. It's all based on the size, but I would say once you get into past the bark into the wood, I would go ½ inch to an inch and you would be more than fine.
All right. What time of year do you typically start treatments?
We start flying drones on August 1st. So anytime after that, really. The rapid response treatment, usually we stop using that around October just because of the disease moving through the trees so quickly. And it's probably past the threshold of using that treatment in October, but we will still mark out pockets all the way until December if we have to. So.
All right. Michael asks, how far out from the infected tree are you treating with the girdle and herbicide method?
The Bruin's root graft model says that the most that a tree, or the most that oak wilt can transmit in a year is 47 feet underground. We used to use 100 feet from the infected tree to a neighboring tree of 100 feet, but that might be a little bit much. And we have been talking about possibly changing that, or to bring that down to 66 feet from the furthest out infected tree out to 66 feet, every tree in between. But as of now, we are just doing it off of experience and just off of calls that we make, because we're kind of used to marking them. So we kind of know how the disease works and how root grafts get broken through different trees that may be interrupting those root grafts, or barriers such as roads. Roads help us out a lot. So it all depends. But if you were treating your own oak wilt pocket in your own woods, I would say that you would be fairly safe with treating every tree within 66 feet of the furthest out infected tree.
Okay. Have you used a basal bark treatment to treat sapling oak within the treatment pocket?
Yes. We usually these get cut while we're in there harvesting the pockets. We do it whenever we can, but usually trees that are under 1 inch, we usually don't treat. Especially if they're in the center of the pocket, because the chances of them spreading the disease are fairly low. So we do, but sometimes we don't if there's like seedling size. Sapling size trees we will treat.
Okay. Do you have to worry about insects emerging from the wood to be processed at mills, or the slash leftover? Sorry, I jumped into the meeting late if I missed this question, or if I missed your explanation for this. I don't know.
There's always a worry about it. Since we already have the disease here, it's not, I guess, the biggest worry, but yeah, it might happen sometimes, but we're keeping the wood on the reservation, so it's not that big of a deal. We're not sending it out to outside places where they might not have it yet, but most of our wood goes to oak wilt infected counties anyways, because most of Wisconsin is infected with oak wilt. So.
All right. Let's see. Do you have any idea how the number of infected trees may interact with GH success? We have found this to be the determining factor in our treatments.
I think that you're trying to get at, like, if the pocket has say 100 trees, there might be a lower success rate than if it has 20 trees. And if that's the question that you were asking, yeah, the more trees that are in a pocket, I feel like it's harder to control, and we have seen that in our data. The smaller pockets are much easier because it hasn't been festering in that area for so long, and that these smaller pockets are obviously easier to manage, easier to make calls on where that disease might be transferring to different trees. So yes, the bigger pockets are definitely harder.
Okay. Linda says, thanks, Tommy. MTE's work with oak wilt management is really exemplary. Question: as you have aggressively sought out and eliminated oak wilt pockets, are you seeing a decrease in the number of new pockets, or at least the size of the pockets?
Yes, for sure. Maybe not the number of pockets, just because say if you have a really bad windstorm, you're obviously going to get a lot of actively wilting trees that year, but we are getting a lot less sizable pockets because of our drone surveying, and we're really on top of getting at those trees at the early stages where there's one tree actively wilting or one tree dead, and that makes for quite small pockets. Usually they're under 20 trees, most of the time around the 10 tree mark or single tree rapid response method.
All right. I'm not quite sure. I'm trying to put this one question together. Lois says 60 feet out to the next tree or to the next root system. I guess she's wondering.
To the next tree. So from that, whenever I mark a pocket like that, I stand at the tree and then I laser out to the next tree, to the stem of it, and the 66 feet that way.
Okay. Following up on James's comment, do you ever run into trees that are hollow or cannot support a girdle? And what options do you do in those situations?
That situation, we would kind of treat that single tree like a cut stump herbicide method. We would just, if the girdler feels that that tree would not be able to support a girdle, then he will safely fell the tree, and then he will spray the stump instead of girdling it. It's basically the same thing. We do that actually quite a bit because there's a lot of smaller trees that might be hollow, or even larger ones that might be hollow. And then we'll make that a priority to go to that pocket in the fall time. And then we will salvage those trees that we have felled.
Okay. Enrico would like to know, do you have any photos of what a double girdle looks like in your system?
Yes, I have one. One second. I might have passed it. Here it is right here. So it's just two girdles stacked on top of each other, maybe anywhere from 5 inches to 1 or 2 inches apart, all the way along the tree, or all the way around the tree, about an inch into the sapwood.
Okay. John asks, would you characterize most of your sites as pure oak or as mixed stands with an oak component? What kind of habitat types do you see most of your infections in?
We see there's some spots of these red oak stands that are mainly pure oak, but like I was saying before, that we support a lot of stand diversity. So most of these stands have other mixed hardwoods in them as well. Obviously, in a pure oak stand, Oak Wilt left alone for a while can really rip through there. And creating stand diversity in some of these stands that are pure oak will help kind of break up some of these root grafts, and that might slow down Oak Wilt a little bit, so that if you happen to miss it for multiple years, you might be able to get it under control a little bit easier, rather than it being a pure oak stand and everything is root grafted together and then it turns into a big mess. And that's where it becomes difficult to manage, is when it does that kind of thing.
Okay. And Enrico says, regarding your girdling, he says, and those cuts allow for enough garland uptake? And then he says, pretty impressive.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. Adam asks, are there any OW management research questions that you wish could be answered in the future?
I guess none really off the top of my head, but I'm sure once this meeting is over with, I'll think of 1,000 of them. But
Okay, Jeffrey says, I know that Three Rivers Park District in the Twin Cities has been dealing with Oak Wilt. They tarp the felled infected tree or the chip pile to prevent this disease from spreading. Have you tried this technique?
No, not really. Just because for chipping, in some pockets, chipping might be possible. But we want to try to salvage most of the wood out of these trees for lumber. So we could definitely do it, but that's not really an option that we're kind of given right now, just because of our logging force being so small. And I'm sure most foresters are seeing that problem, is that the logging force is diminishing. So we're pretty much taking all that we can get from these trees. I hope that answered your question. I wasn't quite sure if I answered it the right way, but.
Okay. We'll wait a minute when probably we'll get a response. All right, but Aaron says, very helpful info and gives me hope for less invasive yet faster methods for preventing the spread. Thanks, Tommy.
Yep, you're welcome.
Okay, if I'm right now, I've kind of finished. Okay, let's see. Enrico says, would screening programs for resistant or even moderately resistant red oaks be useful for your management strategies?
Yes, I'm sure it would, but the possibility of a resistant red oak is fairly small. But that would be awesome if we could find some and do that.
Okay. We have come to the end of our questions at this point. Remember, everyone, you are welcome. Tomorrow, you will get an email from me with Tommy's contact information, and you will be welcome to answer any further questions you might think of after the webinar is over, or any other information you might want to ask. So at this point, I just want to thank our presenter, Tommy Stueck. Thank you very much. We had a good crowd. People are obviously very interested in this problem, and thank you so much for sharing your information and experience. And everyone, thank you all for attending. And at that, I will end the webinar, and everyone have a good day. Thanks again.